Who's going to be on the Raiders practice squad? We're going to discuss it today here on the Raiders Report. We're also going to look at some waiver wire targets that Antonio Pierce Tom Telesco need to consider. The Las Vegas Raiders, they released their initial 53-man roster, and if you haven't already seen that show, it's on the Raiders Report YouTube channel, where I discuss what I think about all 53 players that made it. Now, though, with how young the Raiders want to go, we're going to be breaking down who's going to make this practice squad, or who I at least think the Raiders try to bring back to their practice squad. If you don't know the practice squad rules, 16 players make the team. Las Vegas can keep 17 with David Ogoa as the International Pathway Program player. You're also allowed to have 6 veterans. 6 veterans is a player that has more than 4 years accrued. Is it accrued, that's the word I'm looking for. 6 years accrued. So the Raiders, I think that they're going to go much younger than what you're going to see. I'm also going to start with the offensive side of the football and work my way down to the defensive side of the football from top to bottom. So let's first talk about the offense here. At quarterback, I think that the Raiders are going to try to bring back Carter Bradley, and that really shouldn't surprise many people. If the Raiders were going to keep another QB for that 53-man, I think it would have been Nathan Peterman due to his connections with Getty before, but this is the right decision to go from a practice squad. You keep Carter Bradley. The 2 receivers that I could see the Raiders keeping is Tulu Griffin, UDFA, who's the UDFA that they were the highest on before Rambo Keaton kind of took the scene. Christian Wilkerson didn't make the squad, but I think that Wilkerson has a better chance of making the practice squad compared to Jalen Guyton, where Guyton, I think, could get swept up in the waiver process or could just get signed outright. He's played more than 4 NFL years, so he could get outright. Wilkerson is another player. If they wanted to bring him back right away, they could do the exact same thing. Zach Gentry was a player that I thought would end up making the team, but he's been around the NFL for a little bit as well, so that's a player that I would say at least keep an eye out on him making it. From an offensive line standpoint, these would be the 4 offensive line that I'd bring back. Ben Brown did a lot of work as a center, so that's a name to keep in mind. Jalen McKenzie, they liked him a lot from an offensive tackle standpoint. Corey Luciano was signed recently. He did get waived from an injury clause, so it's could be just something to look at. Maybe he still finds a way to get back to this practice squad. And then Dalton Wagner. Dalton Wagner is another offensive tackle that I would like for the Raiders to try to keep on this squad. So that's 8 players as it stands right now. We're about to get into the defensive side of the football as well, but who's the number 1 player? And I mean the number 1 player you want the Raiders to put on the practice squad. For me personally, when I look at that list of names that I just went through there, the number 1 player out of that list is Tulu Griffin. I think that he's a young player that I personally would like to try to develop. The other player that I would really want to make it is about to be talked about right here, and it's Charles Snowden. Charles Snowden is a name. Woo Governor is a name that I would throw out there. Ron Stone Jr., he got released pretty early yesterday, but another guy that, they labeled as like an injury waive clause. So if he's healthy, I think they try to bring him back. Matthew Butler is going to be a player that they try to bring back. Marquand McCall, I think, is another dude that this organization tries to bring back. And then from their cornerback standpoint, it does get a little bit tricky. You're going to be like, wait, they're not going to keep any linebackers on their practice squad? I don't think that they do. I think when you keep 7 linebackers on your 53-man, you're anticipating Kanai Malga is that name, that once you make an addition, Kanai Malga then just goes down to the practice squad. But for me, I'm picking up the phone, and I'm trying to get Woo Governor as the top priority here, though based off what I've heard, Governor's probably not going to make it back to us. Cornell Armstrong, Sam Webb, 2 other players that I would consider here keeping on this practice squad. Jaden Grant is another dude that you have to keep. And then again, due to that International Pathway Program player, David Ogoa, number 17. That is what I would project the Raiders practice squad to be based on who they're trying to go out and get and who they're trying to bring back. Now, again, we're not really going to know until tomorrow, Wednesday, noon Eastern time, when all the waiver wire picks start to go in there. And once the official practice squad is mentioned, I'll make a video about it. I'll be breaking it down here on the show. So again, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you're subscribed to the Raiders Report. So coming up here, let's talk about the waiver wire targets, because if you're a player in the NFL and you have spent less than 4 years and you get released, you hit the waiver wire. So think of it as like the fantasy football draft. Raiders have the 13th pick on that waiver wire, and there's a lot of good talent out there, and I'm really trying to focus based on needs. So I'll go through, I'll tell you which players that I would look at, put a claim in for if I was AP and Tom Telesco. Before I get into that, though, I love going to football games, and also, I've been telling Chuggs for a while, I got to get me in the Sphere. And when Jeremy showed me this, like, new seats, like, view that you can get in the Sphere, the events that they're doing right now in Las Vegas, UFC event. We got to get there, dude. And if you're like, I want to go, guess what? Shout out to GameTime. Get those last-minute tickets. Download the GameTime app. Create an account. Use code ChatSports for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code ChatSports. That's CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. I love the Super Deal. The Super Deal is the brand new feature that GameTime has, which I'm going through right now, and I'm on my phone, and I'm looking at some of the deals that the Raiders have for this first game up against the Chargers and SoFi. I'm also looking at tickets right now for USC and LSU. That would be a fun game to go to in Allegiant Stadium. But one of the things that I love about the Super Deal, which you can kind of see up here on screen, it's like it shows the best deal that GameTime has to offer for that game. Now, it also goes through and it looks like at amazing deals, great deals. If you're somebody like when you do online shopping, when I do online shopping, or even honestly, if I go to a shop in general, I don't care how nice it is, I go to the clearance rack. I do. I'm not afraid to admit that. Like, I'm going to go to the clearance rack. I'm going to look at the sales before I decide, all right, that's not what I want, and then I'll look at the things that I got to pay full price for. If you think with that mindset, then I think that you're really going to like GameTime. You're going to get the best seats. The price drops. They get closer to the event. As the event gets closer, the prices continue to go down. You're going to get that lowest price guaranteed. And when I'm out in Vegas, I'm already spending a lot of money to get out there. But when I go out there, I want to take, advantage of my time when I'm out there. And the GameTime app helps me be able to plan things that I want to do. It also helps me be sporadic and go to a concert. It helps me be able to go to a comedy event, a football game, whatever it is. So download the GameTime app. Create an account. Use code ChatSports for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments and down in the description of today's show. So let's now start talking about some of these waiver wire targets. And quite frankly, there's probably a few names. And here's me being honest with y'all. There's probably a few names that I missed. Chuggs and I, over the past 24 hours, we're trying to curate some of the best names that I would look at. And I might miss a few, but there are 13 names on this list that if I was the Raiders, I would go out and look. If you're a little bit confused of what the waiver wire is, it is, and this is, I think, a good explanation here from Field Yates with these two tweets here. The vast majority of these moves will be made by releasing or waiving players. A player with 4 or more years of service as vested veteran and thus is outright released. So any player that is an outright veteran, like a Jalen Guyton, he can sign with any team right away, which is what he's saying right here. A non-vested veteran is subject to the NFL's waiver system, which is on Wednesday at noon Eastern time. The league will process waiver claims submitted on any player that was placed on waivers. The priority of the waiver claim order matches the original 2024 NFL draft order. The Raiders drafted pick 13 during the draft. That means they have the 13th pick in the waiver process. So if the Raiders put in for Woo Governor or any of the players that I'm about to mention here and somebody above them in that waiver process, the Broncos are at 12. If anybody does that, then they would get it. I know it says Carolina's 1. They are number 1. It doesn't go back to because the Bears made the trade at number 1. Carolina is number 1 on that list. So let's look at some waiver wire targets. If the Raiders want to look at a quarterback, maybe you want to look at Bailey Zappi. And this was a name that I had so many people mention to me of, Mitch, could the Raiders go out and get Bailey Zappi? If I'm Las Vegas, and here's me being honest with you, do I think Bailey Zappi is better than Carter Bradley? I do. I do honestly think that. But I would actually have just Carter Bradley, who's been in this system and who's probably able to execute our offense a little bit better. That's the guy that I would look at. I was hoping that Dorian Thompson-Robinson would hit the waiver period, but the Browns ended up keeping him. If you want to go with another quarterback that, does have some athletic ability, and I would be curious if Trey Tucker, a player who's got a good connection with his old quarterback in college, Desmond Ridder, maybe he could talk to him a little bit. Ridder was released, so could you find somebody that's got a little bit more mobility, a little bit more talent in that regard? I'm just saying, Desmond Ridder is somebody to keep in mind, and I've been saying the DTR Dorian Thompson-Robinson name for quite some time. He has made the 53-man roster, which is what Mary Kate Cabot said here, but I don't think that Cleveland is happy with its quarterbacks because they kept 4, and they were trying to shop Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley. So the fact that they're fielding calls for Winston and Huntley, I think that tells me that they want to keep Dorian Thompson-Robinson on this roster. So probably not going to have an opportunity to go out and get him. Definitely a name to keep in mind here. He was released by the New York Giants. 2 picks last season, 3 PBUs. Darnay Holmes, I'm telling y'all right now, this is absolutely a player that the nation should keep an eye on for the Raiders putting a submission claim. Another player to keep an eye on is DJ James. He was a 6th-round pick for Auburn this past year. He went to Seattle. They ended up moving on from him. So for the Raiders, I'm looking at certain positions of need. Quarterback is a position of need if you're looking for a QB3. It is. I think it's also at corner. That's definitely a position of need. So DJ James, Darnay Holmes is the name to keep in mind. This name is a familiar name. Tyler Hall, he was released by the Philadelphia Eagles. I thought that Philly might try to move on from James Bradberry. They decided to keep Bradberry. Hall, though, is another good slot corner where if, God forbid, if Nate Hobbs were to go down, you bring back Tyler Hall, who did spend some time with the Raiders. I want to say he played in 11 games last season for the Silver and Black. So Tyler Hall's a name to keep in mind. To me, though, the number one player that if I'm the Raiders, I'm putting a claim in for is Keenan Isaac. He's 6'3", 190 pounds, and he's a big boy. Tampa Bay decided to move on from him, which I'm not going to lie, I was kind of surprised about just because of how well he did play in the preseason, how physical of a player he is, and the physicality that he brings to the football field is something that AP is something that Telesco wants to be able to bring in. And the way that I would look at it is like, okay, the Raiders, they decided to keep 6 corners on their 53-man. These are the 6 players, but also remember, what was I saying all offseason? They want big, long, athletic, lanky corners. And that's a lot of what the Raiders have already brought in. So Keenan Isaac is really a name to keep in mind. Also, he's got some ties there with Carter Bradley as well. Let's now go to the big boys up the middle. Jacqueline Roy, he was a defensive tackle for the Minnesota Vikings, and they were shopping him around, and I didn't know whether or not he was going to end up making this squad. So the fact that they were shopping him, that's a defensive tackle that I would keep an eye on there from LSU. An edge rusher that the Raiders really should go out and put a claim for is KJ Henry. Like, KJ Henry was another player, and this is the way that it happens every year. Old regime, I want to say he was a 5th-round pick last year. Old regime, now he finds a new home. KJ Henry on the waiver wire. He's going to be a name to keep in mind. Defensive tackle Siaki Ika, hopefully I pronounced that right. 3rd-round pick last season out of Baylor. And if you want a better run defender compared to what the Raiders already have, I think like that's what Siaki Ika does here. Better run defender. And the Browns have a much deeper defensive line, especially at defensive tackle. He's going to get picked up somewhere. Definitely a player to keep an eye out for. Gable Stevenson's going to be another one here. And this might be an unpopular opinion. Former WWE star, but was a player that I think like does show some spark and could be a dude that maybe the Raiders want to take a little bit of a flyer on here. Was a wrestler again, even in college. Like I want to say he was a gold medalist or something like that. Yeah, he's a gold medalist. So like showed some of that. But again, the Bills have some good depth there. From an offensive line standpoint, a name that I'll throw out is Brian Hudson. I think one of the best offensive lines in the NFL is the Detroit Lions, and this is, again, more of just a interior offensive lineman that could just help out the Raiders. I don't know if he's better than Jordan Meredith per se, but he's right up in that, like, where I would have him battle it out with Jordan Meredith. This next name I'm going to give you is going to be a controversial one, and it's Josh Ball, okay? Josh Ball is controversial because he's got some domestic violence stuff, okay? And we know where Fred Bilenikoff rule is. We know where all that stands. But this is going to be a name, and it's already been a name that I've seen being thrown out there from a offensive line standpoint. Could the Raiders potentially bring him in? Talent-wise, you could put a claim in for him. All that other stuff, though, definitely needs to be looked into. It's just a fact. And then I'm going to go with Javen White. Javen White spent some time with Chicago last season, was also on the Raiders UDFA. He was from UNLV, was a player that a lot of us, I think, fans did truly love. My point is, if the Raiders are willing to keep 7 linebackers, and if linebacker is a position that is very important, especially on that special teams regard, Javen White, hard-working player, just somebody that I would keep an eye out for. And if we're not going to put anybody on our practice squad, I think Javen would be a good fit with that practice squad. If you want to be able to hit me up on IG and on Twitter, hey, man, you always know where to find me. I'm at Mitchell Renz 365, trying to pump out as much content as I possibly can on all those sites. And if you have any questions about what you saw in today's video or in my 53-man video, easiest spot to get a hold of me is on social media. The next time that Chuggs and I are going to be live on this show, I want to say is going to be on Friday for Raiders Friday Happy Hour, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, unless breaking news does end up happening.